Thank you. And Chancellor, it must be a very busy time. Thank you for sparing the time to come to our conference. We've had a very interesting start to conference this morning, lots of interesting things going on, but you are the main show this afternoon, so I'm very, very pleased that you're able to be here. I mean, as Steph said, you were last here 2 years ago at our conference, and now you've been in government for 6 months. So I think the first question is probably, what do you see as the challenges and the opportunities of the economy at the moment? And more particularly, where do you think manufacturing plays its part in that, Rachel?
So there are massive opportunities in our country. You can see it wherever you go. I was just reflecting on, the last few months and some of the visits I've been on and some of the businesses I met. Just last Friday, I was with Johnny Reynolds and John Healy, RAF Waddington, with 10 or 15 firms in the defence sector.
Right.
And that's obviously was already part of our industrial strategy, one of the 8 sectors that we chose for our industrial strategy, because we see there being huge potential there. But as we step up to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, because the world has changed and we can certainly see that all around us, we need to step up to the challenge of securing our own country, but also securing Europe as well. And I'm determined that as we spend that money on that defence and security, that we use it in a way that can also help stimulate the economy, and particularly to revive some parts of the country that do often feel like they're left behind. And one of the things about jobs in the defence sector, they are in towns and cities all across the United Kingdom that could do with that greater investment. And I also want small businesses in manufacturing to benefit from that investment. And that's why we are looking at the single source procurement rules to get better value for money. It's why we're creating a Defence Innovation Hub at the MOD. We've seen over the last 3 years, when we've been procuring for Ukraine, we've managed to do things much quicker, but we need to make that more of the modus operandi in the MOD so that we can innovate more, support small businesses, particularly with tech and AI, which is an increasingly important part of our defence sector. We're really good in Britain at AI and tech. We're really good in Britain at defence. You can combine those two with the additional spending that we're putting in over the next few years. And I think there are big opportunities. That's just one sector of the economy. Yeah. I could tell similar stories in other parts of the economy because I see that potential all around us. What we need to do now is exploit that potential to get that growth and get those jobs in the UK.
Absolutely right. In fact, we were talking this morning about the 2.5% of GDP to be spent on defence and the uplift there. Very supportive of that across the conference. We have a large community of defence SMEs in particular. But just digging into that one point you just made on procurement reform, we've heard this a lot of times before, Chancellor, about procurement reform in defence, and it always ends up with the larger companies. How are we going to make sure those SMEs are really represented in that? I mean, is that going to be a focus? We had the great announcement earlier in the week with the Prime Minister about where we were with SMEs, but is that going to figure very highly in terms of the reforms that you're talking about with defence?
Yes, because it's really important in increasing the defence budget that we stimulate more innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
And innovation often comes from smaller businesses, from startups, particularly those that are sort of on the sort of the cusp between tech and defence. Yeah. And I think that is where there's massive opportunities. If you look at what's happened in Ukraine in the last few years, it has been investment in technological improvements in way of combating Russia, where I think you've seen the greatest innovation. And that's been born out of necessity, but our increased defence spending now is also out of necessity. We absolutely need to spend more on defence to keep our country secure, to keep Europe secure. And in fact, strong defence, strong security is the bedrock of a strong economy as well. But that innovation that you so often get from small businesses is really essential. And that's why on Friday, John Healy and myself spoke about the Defence Innovation Hub. You'll be hearing more about that. It's also why I've said the National Wealth Fund, which we've endowed with more money, and we're already seeing some great investments coming out of that. I was at Treasury Questions earlier today, and one of the MPs in Cornwall spoke about the investments that the National Wealth Fund had put into Cornwall metals. which is so important if you think about some of the sort of strategic sectors in car manufacturing and the parts that we need for electric vehicles, etc. But the National Wealth Fund is doing great things, but we're also changing their remit so that they can also invest more in defence, alongside UKEF, which just at the weekend signed off a deal with Thales to support exports of defence equipment directly to Ukraine. So the government directly with a 2.5%, UKEF, National Wealth Fund, all working together to drive more private sector and public sector investment, big companies and also those small start-up companies in both defence and tech to get a bit more of those contracts.
That's great. It's going to be welcomed by many companies that we've got here today. The other thing that touches defence, and obviously it's in the news almost every 5 minutes at the moment, is our relationship with the United States. And having been in the defence sector for a long time, there's a lot of work between the US and the UK. So how do you see that relationship? We saw really a very warm visit with the Prime Minister last week with Donald Trump and the White House, and then we see Donald Trump sort of going off in different directions since then. But how do you see that relationship, Chancellor?
Well, our economies and our countries is just so closely intertwined, actually nowhere more than in security and defence, particularly through Five Eyes, but through everything we do, particularly around the intelligence side, we do alongside the United States. And on the economy front, 1 million Brits work for American firms, 1 million Americans work for British firms. So our economies are closely intertwined as well. And you know, I think that we're all very pleased with the way that the meeting between our Prime Minister and President Trump went last week, searching now for some sort of trade deal, which I think could be mutually beneficial for both our economies. I've always believed that free trade is good for countries that are exporting as well as countries importing. The freedom in terms of investment as well is good for the country investing, but also for the recipient of that investment. And trade and investment flows between the UK, well, trade flows alone are worth something like £300 billion a year. And we have balanced trade with the US, neither a surplus or a deficit. We have very balanced trade. So I think there's every reason to be hopeful about coming to some sort of trade deal that could be good for UK businesses and US businesses and good for consumers on both sides of the Atlantic as well. I'm not naive. This is not going to be an easy thing to secure for reasons that we all understand. There have to be give and take on both sides. We absolutely recognise that. But I do think there's a big opportunity here. But I would also just add, it shouldn't be about choosing between the US and our nearest neighbours and trading partners in Europe. There's going to be the UK-European Summit on the 19th of May to reset that relationship between us and our nearest neighbours in Europe. And you're already seeing that reset of a relationship again when it comes to security and defence. You saw that when Keir Starmer went to Paris last Monday, when Macron and Scholz and Maloney and other leaders were here on Sunday. The criticality of that relationship, both on defence and on trade, is also important. And I know that for many businesses in this room, particularly smaller businesses, you've been hit by the red tape and bureaucracy since the trade deal was done with the European Union. We do need to make it easier for great British businesses to trade and export around the world. And I, again, believe that that is in our mutual interests, our interest, and in the interests of our European partners, if we can get freer trade once again. Absolutely.
You're in full agreement with everyone in this room on that point, Chancellor. I think that's very good. One more question from me, and then I know Steph's got a couple of other questions from the audience to ask. Many of the companies in here are small companies as well as the large manufacturing businesses. Obviously, a lot of them are coping with the increases in pre-profit taxes like NICs and things like that coming up. The community is generally optimistic. It's confident in the future. Manufacturers are resilient. And I think the expectation is around what the industrial strategy is going to do for them longer term. So could you just say in a few words what your vision for that industrial strategy is for the manufacturing sector in this country? And what really is, how's it going to, you know, it's almost like the other side of the equation, isn't it? It's the mitigation. We can see the future, we can invest for the future. We've got a long term there. But how do you think about the industrial strategy and what that's going to do?
The first thing to say is that the industrial strategy isn't going to be written by me or Johnny Reynolds or our civil servants. Right. It's going to be written with business. So the chair of the Industrial Strategy Council, of course, is Claire Barkley from Microsoft, and on that Industrial Strategy Council, we've got a number of members from the private sector, including from manufacturing, around that table, writing it together. I strongly believe, so does Johnny, that co-design is the best way to make policy. So this is not going to be something imposed on advanced manufacturing or on life sciences or on the defence sector. This is something that's going to be jointly worked on. We hope around the time of the spring statement on the 26th of March to have set out some more detail in one of those industrial strategy sectors, and then in the
hopefully advanced manufacturing,
and then in the lead up to the spending review on June the 11th. That we would have published more detail on those industrial strategies. So we're working quickly to get those published. I already set aside money for automotives and life sciences in the budget last year. And look, I do recognise the challenge that higher national insurance contributions put on businesses. I was faced with a situation last year where there was a £22 billion in-year black hole in the public finances. I had to take action to be able to stabilise the public finances and indeed stabilise public services. But one crucial thing, which I think probably in the long term will have the biggest impact from what I did in the budget last year, was £100 billion extra in capital spending over the course of this Parliament, which we were able to unlock by reshaping the fiscal rules to treat capital spending differently from day-to-day spending. So the fiscal rules say that we have to balance day-to-day spending with tax receipts. That's important. You should be able to fund your day-to-day spending through tax receipts. And then the second fiscal rule, the investment rule, to bring public sector net debt down as a share of GDP, but for the first time count the benefits of investment, not just the costs. Absolutely. And that freed up £100 billion compared to the plans we inherited. And those plans are ones that we would deliver alongside this sector, because it will be this sector that builds the energy infrastructure, builds the digital infrastructure, builds the transport infrastructure that our country needs, but also businesses need, both in terms of those opportunities to grow and create those projects, but also the indirect effects of those projects through lower energy bills, better transport connectivity, and better digital infrastructure as well. And so that industrial strategy will be a partnership between our sectors. It will benefit directly those who operate in those sectors, but it has wider impacts for the overall productivity and growth performance of our country.
Thank you very much. That's very, very positive. Over to you, Steph, for a couple of questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks. We've got some decent time, so I want to take some questions from delegates first, and then the media will definitely get you a chance. Should we get a microphone? Andrew, do you want to go first? We'll just get a microphone to you. And if you guys can just keep your hands up as well, a couple of others, and we'll... Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Andrea Wilson from Honall. We're a precision machining business based in Bedfordshire. Over 90% of UK manufacturers are SMEs, and we are the lifeblood and backbone of British industry. And yet, in the first draft of the industrial strategy, we're mentioned less than half a dozen times, and currently there's no SME representation on the Industrial Strategy Council. How will you improve SME representation and increase SME ability to feed into future policy in order to impact positively the UK supply chain? And would you consider potentially appointing an experienced manufacturing professional to help you do that?
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for that question. I hope that what you've heard today from me about the importance of SMEs in the defence sector, but also more widely in the economy, what we want to do on procurement to open up procurement opportunities for SMEs are things that have been encouraging to you. But in addition to that, the reforms we're making to the pension system to unlock long-term patient capital are all about helping small, innovative businesses to grow, create more jobs, create more wealth and prosperity, and crucially to keep those businesses in the UK. And similarly, that the work that we're doing through the British Business Bank and the British Growth Partnership is about trying to leverage finance and private capital to help small businesses to grow. And you said that you're based in Bedfordshire. The Oxcam Growth Corridor can be a huge benefit for places like Bedfordshire, with new train stations, new opportunities to grow the economy. And that work's been led by Minister Patrick Vallance, and we're really keen that we use that to showcase some of the industries that are offering huge potential in our economy, like tech, like life sciences, that are clustered in Oxford and Cambridge, but other parts of the country, Bedford, Milton Keynes, etc., can benefit from if we have that infrastructure linking those towns and those cities.
Just on that point Andrea made as well about expertise and having someone from the sector, it's something we were talking about earlier, is whether there is enough expertise in the civil service and in government to actually know what's really going on. Are you confident you have got the expertise?
But I think it would be really good to have more secondments between the private sector and the civil service. I think that could help both ways. I think it would really help civil service to have experience working in the private sector, and similarly it would help the public sector to have those people from the sector. Now, we're trying to do that through different groups and that we're establishing. One of the things that I had in opposition was the British Infrastructure Council that we then took into government because it had worked so well for us in opposition. So we do, try our very hardest to work every day with the business sector, both with the representative bodies like Make UK, but also with directly with the businesses. And I know that Johnny is determined to do that as well, and we'll be publishing more information on the small business strategy in the next few months.
Okie dokie. There's a question here, I think. Yeah, panel one. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, Chancellor. Rowan Crozier, Chief Executive at C. Brandauer, an SME producing metal stamped components and precision tooling. The sector is facing major skills shortage with 61,000 live vacancies in manufacturing. Apprenticeships play a key role in delivering skills, yet starts are down in our sector by 42% since the introduction of the apprenticeship levy. Make UK and Brandauer are huge champions of apprenticeships, and we all have our part to play in delivering them. My question is, what is the government doing to support businesses, in particular SMEs, to recruit the talent we need and fix the apprenticeship system?
You're absolutely right to point to the problems with the apprenticeship levy. We're turning it into a growth and skills levy, and in National Apprenticeship Week a couple of weeks ago, we announced increased flexibilities about how businesses can use the money from the apprenticeship or growth and skills levy. And crucial amongst those was about the requirements around maths and English. Because we want apprenticeships to be available to more people from a wider variety of backgrounds who didn't perhaps get all the GCSEs that they had wanted to, but still deserve a chance to get on and get skills in life. And so those changes in requirements should open up an additional 10,000 apprenticeships every year, as well as offering shorter term apprenticeships, which with money you can access through the growth and skills levy to fill some of those skills shortages that I know exist, particularly in manufacturing and in construction at the moment.
We've spoken about that a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. And I know it's something you're really passionate about,
right,
Stephen.
yes, yeah.
It's so tricky though when you, as someone who comes from a background where there was lots of kids I grew up with who didn't have the structure in their lives to do well at GCSEs, to then hear that, you say, oh, but if they don't get their GCSEs, we'll give them another option. It should be parity of esteem between the two. It should be whether you do GCSEs or you get vocational qualifications, you should be treated the same, and it's not the lesser thing.
Yeah, but at the moment, if you don't get those GCSEs, you're not allowed to go on to do A-levels, and you're not allowed to do an apprenticeship. But that's absolutely crazy to say that just because you didn't get a C in English GCSE, that you shouldn't be able to go and do an apprenticeship in manufacturing or construction.
Yeah.
Why would we want to say to a young person, oh, I'm sorry, you're now barred from both vocational and an academic route? This is about saying that, we want everybody to be able to get on.
But there's lots of kids who can't do that GCSE because it's so academic and pure, and it's not relating to the working life of where maths is needed.
Well, that's why we're reforming it.
Yeah,
exactly.
So do you think we'll genuinely see reform in education, not just tinkering at the sides?
Yeah, well, this is about saying 10,000 people every year will now be able to access apprenticeships, will get apprenticeships who weren't previously because they were not, they were told you can't do an apprenticeship because you don't meet the requirements. But we're removing those barriers so that young people can actually get on. And it is so crucial. We have got 1 million young people today who are not in education, employment or training. it is a stain on our country that we are allowing a million people at what should be the best time of their life to get skills, to make friendships, to build their confidence, that instead they're sitting at home doing, often nothing. And this thing, it's 10,000, it's more is needed, but it's recognising that absolutely crucial need to open up opportunities for our young people.
Okay, look. Yeah, we've got another question here. We'll take one there, we'll take some media ones. Yeah.
Chancellor Stephen, my name is Mike Maddock. I'm Managing Director of a company called Performance Engineered Solutions. It's an SME based in Sheffield on the Advanced Manufacturing Park. Chancellor, my question is about AI and AI adoption. I hope you agree that AI has the potential to be transformative for the manufacturing sector. But as with all digital technologies, there's a huge gap in the ability of large companies to adopt digital technology and small businesses. And small businesses are struggling to raise the capital to fund these transformative technologies and also find the skills to implement it. How do we help businesses adopt digital technology and also help us reduce the productivity gap?
Yeah. First of all, I think the stuff that happens at the advanced manufacturing site in South Yorkshire is a really great example of public, private and university partnership in action. And that's what this government wants to see more of. And I think that's been one of the most successful of all of them in the country. So thanks for drawing attention to it. You're absolutely right about AI, and it will touch all parts of the economy, manufacturing, but also the service sector as well. But if we want to sort of experience its full benefits, we need to make sure that diffusion happens right the way through the economy. Because one of the real challenges in the UK economy, and it's what Andy Haldane from the RSA, formerly Bank of England, talks about, that long tail of companies with lower productivity. And it is often smaller businesses that struggle to employ and take on board the latest technologies. And indeed, and comes back to the previous question about apprenticeships and training, skill up people to be able to use those technologies as well. And one of the things that Matt Clifford is working with Keir Starmer and also Peter Kyle on is not just how we can be at the frontier of new technologies, although that is really important, but also how we can make sure that diffusion happens, both in terms of diffusion of technologies, but also training up people in smaller businesses as well to take advantage of them. It's something we're very much focused on.
Right, two more questions from here. Yeah, go on.
Thank you. Chancellor, my name's Hugo Rosemont. I work on defence issues at Amazon Web Services, and my question is in relation to the intersection of defence and tech that you've mentioned, and thank you very much for the government's leadership and announcements in this area. Can I ask you about how it is that we as the tech community, together with the manufacturing sector, can come together? Can you offer some encouragement through the industrial strategies that we don't fall down into lines of individual sectors, and how can we all together work together to support those UK
It's those cross-cutting themes that's the important part.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your question, Hugo. As sort of Stephen just sort of alluded to, there are lots of things, I guess we call sort of horizontal policies that sit across the different pillars of industrial strategy. Skills is one of them. Technology is another one. That there is no sector of the economy, whether it is life sciences, even the cultural industries, certainly financial services, as well as advanced manufacturing and defence, that absolutely need those crucial skills and technologies to be able to succeed. And particularly, it comes to the last question, small businesses need to be able to access those. And one of the things we were able to continue funding is, what was that?
Made Smarter.
Yeah, Made Smarter.
Digital adoption for SMEs.
Yes.
So the Made Smarter programme.
Yeah, which is something that you, Stephen,
champion all the time,
lobbied
don't I?
for.
Exactly.
And then Johnny, then on your behalf,
Yes.
lobbies me for.
Fantastic.
So that's why we got that into the budget.
We
to
have the Made
help.
Smarter guys here today, actually, and they'll be very pleased to hear that. So that's good.
Yeah, and that is all about helping in manufacturing smaller businesses access those technologies and those skills. And so that was something I was pleased to be able to increase funding for in the budget, because I think, a couple of the questions today have been about how do smaller businesses get the talent and also get the technology, and how can we make more of the fantastic tech sector we've got in the UK, you know, I think second only to the US in terms of our adoption and our use of technology in the UK. That's a really exciting thing, but we need it to touch more parts of the economy.
Yeah. A couple of minutes left, we'll just quickly take this one and then the media ones.
Hi there. Katie Moss, Trent Refractories, based in Scunthorpe. We're an SME and we make technical high temperature products that supply into the foundation industries.
Yeah.
So predominantly we're supplying to steel, which is also going to be supporting the defence needs going forward. It's nice to hear that you are visiting manufacturers, and I would like to add myself to that list. You are more than welcome to come and see what we do and the importance of those. Being the only female UK CEO in our sector for what we do, not many people know what a refractory is. I would like to understand just a little bit more about the industrial strategy and how it's going to ensure it secures the future, not only for advanced manufacturing, which is obviously very important, but without without the foundation industries, we can't have advanced manufacturing. So, and the industries that underpin the foundation industries, such as our own. So, have you got any thoughts on how the industrial strategy will take care of that and make sure that those sort of old industries that are seen as tired are not forgotten?
Yeah. Oh, thanks very much for that question. And you are right that some of those foundational sectors, I think steel included in that, are vital for the wider economy. And if you think about some of the big projects we're investing in, whether it's the Trans-Pennine Route upgrade, the Oxford to Cambridge growth corridor, a new runway at Heathrow, we will need the steel industry to be able to supply those businesses, as well as the deal that was done recently between British Steel, Scunthorpe, and HS2 to provide the steel for that. So we need a strong steel sector. We already have done the deal with Tata that we were very pleased about. It's not perfect, but it was, I think, the best deal that could have been done and preserves jobs and investment there. And we're working closely with British Steel to secure their future. I think there's obviously huge opportunities around the electric arc furnaces. There's also big opportunities around carbon capture and storage, which is why the government, alongside BP and Equinor, in that phase 1 of CCS projects in Teesside and Merseyside, we recognise that for the future of energy-intensive industries in the UK, carbon capture as well is going to be very important, as well as those electric arc furnaces.
Yeah. Right, a couple of media questions then. I think we've got Paul from Sky. Do you want to ask one? Thanks.
Sky News Chancellor, it's Paul Kelso from Sky News. You've made a commitment to 2.5% of GDP spent on defence, rising to 3%. Are British taxpayers going to have to get used to the idea that Britain's defence and the support of Ukraine is going to mean more taxation? And could I ask, if you show that commitment in spending to the United States, British troops have already shown their commitment fighting and sometimes dying alongside American troops. Do you trust that the President and his Vice President will make good on their commitment to European and British security?
First of all, we set out the plan to get to 2.5% of GDP spent on defence in this Parliament. It's the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That is fully costed and fully funded by a commensurate reduction in what we spend on international development assistance. The Prime Minister set out that we would look to take that to 3% in the next Parliament as economic and fiscal circumstances allow, but I will never play fast and loose with the public finances, and I will always explain where the money is going to come from. But I think you should note that it was through spending reductions elsewhere that we were able to fund this increase in defence spending. That was the choice that we made rather than increasing taxation. At the last week, when the Prime Minister met President Trump and Vice President Vance, the American president made his commitment, renewed his commitment to Article 5 of NATO, which is really important. As I said to Stephen earlier, the UK and the US, in terms of security and defence, are closely intertwined. They are our closest partners on defence and security, and that will continue to be the case.
Okay. Harry at ITV. Thanks. And then we'll...
Thank you very much. Harry Horton, ITV News. People often say that you should judge President Trump not on what he says and what he does. In the past 5 days, he's kicked President Zelensky out of the White House and he's cut off military aid to Ukraine. Can the US still be trusted to defend Ukraine? And if I may, you've said that you have released the interest from frozen Russian assets. Would you like to see those frozen Russian assets themselves be released, given the urgent need for more military aid to Ukraine?
Well, first of all, the US has supported Ukraine more than any other country in the world. It is important now that Europe steps up. We have done that by raising our defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. I met with other European finance ministers last week when I was at the G20 meetings. There is a recognition across Europe that we must all step up to secure the collective defence of our continent. On the issue of frozen Russian sovereign assets, I was able on Saturday to sign a loan agreement with the Ukrainians worth £2.26 billion as part of a $50 billion G7 scheme. That loan, which will be able to be used by the Ukrainians to spend on military equipment, that's something that no other G7 country is allowing, but we're giving them that flexibility. That money will be available in the next few days for them to start spending on their defence. To seize the assets is much trickier under international law and would require partnership between countries. But I'm very clear it should be Russia paying for the damage that they have caused. And that's why we did this loan agreement at the weekend.
If you can throw a mic at Faisal, you've got 30 seconds. If you can catch, and then we'll got to let the Chancellor go. Right, make it quick, Faisal.
Two big announcements, Chancellor, overnight from the White House. I know you think that you can get the UK exempt from any tariffs, but what's your reaction as to the impact on the British economy from a sort of G7 trade war with tariffs going, as high as they've been since the 1940s? And on the Ukraine announcement, would you be minded now to buy British in terms of things like the Eurofighter Typhoon rather than those F-35s, given what we're hearing out of America?
First of all, on tariffs, I've always been really clear that I believe strongly that free trade is good for exporters and importers for both countries on the sides of a trade deal. And so I don't want to see tariffs increase. I don't think it serves anyone well. And it's absolutely the case that even if tariffs aren't applied to the UK, we will be affected by slowing global trade, by a slower GDP growth and by higher inflation than otherwise would be the case. And we don't want to see tariffs. And I will continue to make the case with all my international counterparts for free and open trade. Your second question was about how to spend the uplift of what we're spending on GDP. Well, I do want to make sure that as we spend more on defence, that is used to support British jobs and British industries. That's why I met on Friday with UK defence companies and companies that are operating in the UK to work on how we can increase the capacity and capability of our firms to step up to this moment in the same way that the government is stepping up to this moment. It's also why we're announcing the Defence Innovation Hub to help our smaller businesses, including many of this room, also benefit from that uplift in spending. Now, we'll always have a need to buy things from abroad. I don't want to pull up the drawbridge, but as we spend more on defence, of course, I want to see that benefit the UK economy and UK jobs.
Okay, we've got through loads there. Thank you so much, Chancellor.
It's like a marathon.
Yeah. Put your hands together, please, for Rachel Reeves, Chancellor. Second.
Fantastic.